From a young age, my grandparents raised and cherished me. Tragically, I lost my beloved grandmother in a minor accident. Amidst my grief, I received an unexpected message from my long-lost sister-in-law. The message read, "I need you to take care of your grandmother who passed away 3 months ago." There was so much I wanted to say, but my cherished grandmother was no longer there. I witnessed her passing with my own eyes. This call would prove to be a turning point, revealing long-hidden truths. My name is Linda Thompson, a 45-year-old single woman. The last significant male relationship I had was during my college years. After parting ways with him, I immersed myself in the working world, joining a major cosmetics company's marketing department. Overtime and weekend shifts became the norm. Before I knew it, I had missed my chance at marriage. 6 years ago, I switched careers, moving to a desk job at a nursing home. Previously, I commuted for an hour and a half each way on packed trains. Making it back home on the last train felt like luck. Now, I work just a 10-minute bike ride away from home. My current job offers standard days off and overtime is rare. However, these weren't the reasons I changed jobs. I've never left my childhood home. I'm confident in my finances and take pride in my household skills. So why haven't I moved out? Because I love my family, especially my dear grandmother. I was born and raised in California. My family consists of my parents, grandparents, and my older brother, Brian, who is 5 years my senior. He is now 50 years old. Although I love my family, my relationship with Brian is complicated. I used to adore him as my brother. He was a gentle, protective sibling. However, Brian changed after college, securing a job in car sales, moving out early, and marrying a colleague 2 years later. From that point on, we drifted apart. He never returned to our childhood home, not for Thanksgiving, spring break, or even Christmas. All I know is that he lives somewhere in the South, but the details are vague. I can't remember the last time I saw Brian's face or heard his voice. It feels like it's been at least 5 years since we last spoke. His parting words were, "Ever since I became a manager, I've been super busy. I'm leaving everything home related to you." My impression of him is that he has become detached and unfeeling. This prompted my career change and decision to stay in my childhood home, ensuring it remained protected. Both my parents are retired. My 93-year-old grandfather suffered a stroke a few years ago, but has since recovered. Though he requires constant care and cannot live independently, my parents are currently caring for him. Then there's my grandmother, Betty Thompson, aged 92. My beloved Grandma Betty played a central role in raising my siblings and me. While my parents worked, my grandparents, particularly Grandma Betty, looked after us and taught me so much. I needed to survive these days. Though Grandma Betty couldn't go out much, she was lively enough to walk freely around the house. That's why I switched jobs to work at a nursing home, allowing me to take care of her if anything happened. As I prepared to leave for work one morning, Grandma Betty called out to me. "When you forgot something, huh?" she asked. "I haven't forgotten anything," I replied. "Here, have some hard candies," she said, handing me a few black licorice candies. "Right, thanks," I responded, smiling. Licorice had always been a favorite treat for both Grandma Betty and me. I slipped the candies into my suit pocket and left the house with a smile. Then tragedy struck suddenly. Grandma Betty had a severe accident. According to my father, she had been hanging laundry on the upstairs balcony when she missed a step on the stairs and fell. This was something we had always feared. We had often told her to leave the laundry to Mom and Dad because the stairs were dangerous. But Grandma Betty, like me, was stubborn and believed in doing things on her own. No one was to blame. It was just an unfortunate accident that could have happened at any time. Everything happened quickly after that. Grandma Betty suffered complex fractures to her femur and pelvis and never made it home from a hospital. Just 4 months later, she passed away due to old age. I was heartbroken, shedding tears and mourning deeply, but I am now an adult and the breadwinner of the house. I couldn't afford to be consumed by sorrow. I took care of the funeral, cremation, and interment arrangements. Grandma Betty was originally from the Midwest, and without any close relatives to contact, we decided as a family to hold a small funeral with just close family members. We had to invite my brother and his wife, and I assumed they would attend without hesitation. However, I was wrong. I couldn't reach them by phone or WhatsApp. I also sent an email but received no response. As a last resort, I sent a text message, and the reply came on the day of the cremation. I'm very busy overseas for work. Sorry, but I can't make it. I'll send the money later, it said. I was indifferent to the money upon reading the message. I found myself speaking out loud without meaning to. Can his job really be so demanding that he can't even spare a moment to bid farewell to our beloved grandmother? It was difficult to comprehend. As I placed flowers, a photo of Grandpa, and her favorite black candy in Grandma's casket, her makeup perfectly applied as if she were merely asleep, my perception of my brother shifted. From that moment on, I began to harbor resentment toward him. Time moved on, and now it is winter. For me, the changing seasons don't matter much. It feels the same whether it's spring, summer, autumn, or winter. I've even contemplated leaving my job. But with Grandpa still alive and my parents likely to need care soon, I must continue working to support them. These thoughts carried me through my workday on autopilot, my heart heavy with emptiness. During a lunch break on a weekday, I received a call from an unexpected source. If her number hadn't been saved in my contacts, I might not have answered. The caller ID displayed sister-in-law. It was Heather Thompson, my brother's wife. She is 46 years old and my only connection to my brother. I remember only a brief conversation with her after their wedding. Why would she be calling now? I considered ignoring the call, but the persistent ringing convinced me to answer. Yes, this is Linda, I said. Sorry to disturb you at work, Heather began apologetically. This is Heather, Brian's wife. It's been a while. Despite her higher position and age, Heather always approached us with a humble attitude. When she chose to marry my brother, she made sure to introduce herself to my parents and me, even on my brother's behalf. In short, she's a kind person, which made her unexpected call all the more puzzling. It's all right, I replied. But do you need something? I tried my best to sound calm as I asked the question. Heather hesitated for a moment, her voice uncertain. It's hard for me to bring this up. It's about Betty, your grandmother. What happened to my grandmother? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. We've been taking care of her on my husband's orders, but the time we agreed upon has already passed, Heather said. Can you come and pick her up? I struggled to grasp what Heather was saying. Wait, you're saying you've been taking care of my grandmother Betty, who died 3 months ago. After a moment of confusion, I asked the question, aware that it sounded nonsensical. Heather's reply was equally puzzling. Yes, we've been taking care of Betty at our place. Wait, she died 3 months ago, she said, her voice filled with genuine surprise. Why don't we take a moment to calm down? I suggested, and Heather agreed. After a few minutes, I collected myself and carefully explained to Heather that my grandmother had passed away. In contrast, Heather's response was bewildering. She claimed that Brian and Heather had been told my grandmother needed care and took her in until arrangements could be made. They had been living with my grandmother at their home. This led me to 2 possible conclusions. Either Heather and I were both not lying, which seemed unlikely, or my brother Brian was the one not telling the truth. I had considered the possibility of such a blatant lie from him, even though it would be quickly exposed. But there were matters I needed to address before pursuing this further. I wanted to contact Brian right away, but he remained practically unreachable on his mobile phone. I told Heather that I had never used my husband's cell phone. He wouldn't allow it. However, she suggested that she could talk to him on her cell phone while he was at home. He's been working remotely more often lately, I interjected. I think if I asked, he'd probably be willing to have a video call. While I believed in the power of face-to-face persuasion, there was a problem. I wasn't even sure where they were living now. We've been living in my city in California for over 10 years, so it's easy for us to visit your house, Linda, Heather said. For now, we agreed to talk to Brian on Heather's cell phone that night and ended the call. We devised various other plans, but I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. I-City was just the next town over, but how much lying would satisfy him? Expecting me to care for a stranger's elderly woman just months after Grandma passed away was too much. It was repugnant. When I got home, I called Brian on Heather's cell phone at the agreed time of 8 p.m. By the way, Heather was also waiting in my room at home, thanks to her kindness and enthusiasm. Despite my constant attempts to contact him, Brian answered Heather's cell phone after just 3 rings. I made sure Heather could hear the conversation by putting the sound on speaker. Where are you right now? You haven't even prepared dinner, he said in an imposing and arrogant tone. He wasn't the same Brian anymore. It's me, Brian, I declared. He seemed confused by my sudden interruption. I braced myself, waiting for my brother's next words. That's Linda, isn't it? Where's Heather? He asked. I'm here, Heather replied assertively. Why are you with Linda? Brian fumbled, then quickly regained his composure. Did you tell Linda about that matter? He asked. Yes, I did, she responded calmly. I told you it was too soon to discuss it, he exclaimed, revealing a sudden shift in his attitude about the issue. I assumed he was referring to our grandmother. I heard from Heather that you've been working remotely lately, I began. What about it? I could almost see the scowl on my brother's face. Why don't we talk face to face using a remote work app from now on? I suggested. I'll send you the ID and password. If you refuse, I'll take Linda and return home, Heather offered as a backup plan. Reluctantly, my brother agreed. I sent the ID and password using Heather's phone, and we waited for him to join. Soon my brother's face appeared on the screen, slightly fuller than before, but unmistakably him. It's Brian. So what's so important that we have to talk face to face? I'm busy, he said, attempting to downplay the situation and infuriating me further. Isn't it obvious? This is about our grandmother. What do you mean by asking us to take in our grandmother who died 3 months ago? I questioned. To my astonishment, he responded calmly, You must be misunderstanding something. Our grandmother isn't dead. I'm taking care of her at my place. Linda, you asked for this, didn't you? I was at a loss for words. Was my brother really this scared of Heather finding out the truth? Could he truly be capable of such deception? I was shocked to think that this was my own brother. I was so furious that I was close to tears. But I sent you a text message, I said through choked sobs. I don't remember that. Grandma's here with me right now. Do you want me to bring her over? Brian's defiance left no room for my tears. Yes, bring her here, I demanded. Brian left his seat and returned a few minutes later with an elderly woman in a wheelchair. Say hello, Grandma, he prompted. Linda, it's been a while. I'm Betty. The old woman spoke slowly. I wish she would stop this farce. Anger surged through me again. This woman was not my beloved grandmother. The old woman on the screen bore no resemblance to my grandma. My grandmother would never have called me Linda. Brian seemed committed to denying reality to the bitter end. She's a completely different person, I argued. As people age, their appearance changes. She's been showing signs of dementia recently, so it's possible her memories of you are unclear. Are you denying the death certificate filed with the district office? I pressed. Of course not, Brian smirked. Documents can be easily forged these days. I was prepared for this. I had a plan. Just wait, I'll show you some evidence too, I said, leaving the room. I left the room, leaving Brian bewildered behind me, and returned a few minutes later with my own evidence. I returned to my room with the evidence in hand. Well, isn't it, Brian? Long time no see, you ungrateful one. I called out. Grandpa, you were supposed to be bedridden, Brian said, taken aback by the sudden evidence. His eyes widened. I was prepared to die at one point, but I still can't go to the bathroom on my own. My brain is still sharp, though, Grandpa continued. I've heard all about it from Linda. Are you saying the woman next to you is my wife, Betty? Nonsense. Betty was far more beautiful. Cornered, Brian hung up the phone, likely trying to end the video call. Heather, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Are you running away, Brian? Going to Catherine's place? Brian's face paled, visible even through the computer screen. How do you know that? He asked, clearly flustered. I've suspected it for a while, Brian. You've underestimated me. Your grandmother often mentioned Catherine, Heather revealed. Catherine? That's not my name or my mother's, I replied. I've confirmed with Linda that she doesn't remember anyone named Catherine. Heather had been suspicious for some time and hired a private detective to investigate potential infidelity. The results came quickly, pictures of Brian at the scene of the affair. It turned out Catherine's grandmother was the one Brian had been caring for, and he had been preparing various things to divorce Heather and remarry Catherine. Brian's relationship with Catherine, a subordinate in her late 20s at work, was part of a plan to win her favor. He was trying to move Catherine's grandmother into a care home while trying to remove his own family from our home. This was all part of his plan to divorce Heather without any blame and remarry Catherine. Heather had proven all of this and approached me honestly. She was an exceptionally intelligent woman, despite her unassuming appearance and demeanor. "Do you have anything to say?" I asked Brian, prepared only to listen. "I'm really sorry. Please forgive me. I never intended to deceive you, and Heather, I apologize to you as well. I'll end things with Catherine," Brian said, bowing his head through the screen. Advancements in technology these days make it easy to see his tearful face clearly from afar. "Grandpa, please help me," he pleaded. "Fool. After using Betty and betraying my beloved granddaughter and daughter-in-law, I never want to see your face again. This is the last time." "Linda, you too," Grandpa said sternly. "I never want to see your face again either." "Heather, I've already completed the divorce mediation process. I'm returning to my parents' house, so we'll see each other in court next." "Goodbye, big brother," I said before ending the remote conversation on my laptop. As the seasons changed and the autumn equinox arrived, I visited my grandmother's grave alone. With my hands clasped together, I reflected on the events that had transpired. Brian's divorce from Heather was settled in her favor. He was ordered to pay a substantial amount of alimony and returned home in tears at one point. Thanks to Grandpa, who remains mentally sharp, Brian was virtually disowned. His will now states that Brian is no longer family. Brian had hoped to remarry Catherine, but his situation was no longer appealing. Divorced in his 50s and deeply in debt, he struggled to find another job after quitting his longtime position at the car dealership. He now lives in a modest one-bedroom apartment, working odd jobs and paying alimony. It's a classic case of reaping what you sow. Most of my information about Brian came from Heather. We became friends after everything settled, and we often spend time together. "Grandmother, I'll come again," I said as I stood up from her gravestone. A strong breeze blew, and I heard a voice I adored. "Lynn, thank you. Please take care of your grandpa for a little while," the voice said. I muttered, "Grandmother," and suddenly realized I was holding something in my right hand, a piece of black licorice candy. It was odd because I hadn't brought any as an offering. I'm not particularly religious, but could it be a sign from my grandmother? Perhaps not. There's always black licorice at the altar, so I must have unconsciously picked one up and forgotten about it. Still, the thought of my grandmother watching over me gave me strength. "Thank you, grandmother," I murmured, looking up at the sky. Then I left